Hi everyone, this is Ray Poynter and welcome to Going from Research Grind to Actionable Results. This is the 5th webinar in our series on automation, a series sponsored by Zapistore. And the agenda for today is really simple. I'm going to give you 10 tips for how to move from what we're doing now to where we want to be. And then we're going to take the Q&A, and I'm happy to take questions on today's webinar, but actually on any of the topics that we've covered during the year or on things that you think are relevant and coming up around the world of automation. The first of my 10 tips is that speed is king. And this links very closely to a phrase that's been doing rounds for quite a while now. Sheryl Sandberg at Facebook highlighted this as one of the mottos there: finished is better than perfect. And it's better than perfect for several reasons. If things are late, they are not useful. And usually the alternative to finished is late. Your perfect will not be the same as my perfect, will not be the same as the client's perfect. So anyway, it's a false goal. So speed is king, finished is better than perfect. Now, yes, of course, clients want things cheaper and better as well as faster. But the most frequent need, when I go and I interview clients and we have discussions with end users about the most important thing, it is faster. That's the thing that crops up time and time again. And there are two elements of why faster is so important to us in the research industry. The first is that it enables market research to be used in more situations. There is this phrase that cropped up probably 6 or 7 years ago now, and is becoming more and more common: at the speed of business. So we used to think of research as having a natural speed. The design was going to take this amount of thought and this amount of process. What is the right amount of time to do this project? However, market research fits in a business context, and there is a speed of business. And if we are not operating at that speed, we can't be used, no matter how much somebody wants to use us or how useful we could be in theory. If we can't deliver to the right timeline, we are not useful. And the second element of speed is it enables agile approaches. For example, we can include more rounds of try and learn. We can't do agile without having more speed in the process. The second tip is don't compete with machine. So this is a statue which is commemorating a mythical character from the USA, John Henry. And he was a railway guy. He drove spikes into concrete to help break the rocks and lay the tracks across America. And he was really upset in the 19th century when they brought in a steam drill. He thought that it was an affront to the dignity of man. And so he challenged the machine, and they created a competition. And John Henry versus the steam drill. And the point about the story is that he won the competition slightly, but died immediately afterwards. So they replaced everybody with the steam drill. You do not want to be in the position of competing with machines that can do the same thing as you. You want to make sure you're doing things that the machine can't do, or you want to be using the machine to do things better. You do not want to be competing with the machine. Nobody today would say, I'm going to challenge the machine on rivaling for arithmetic. Now, occasionally those scanning machines in the supermarkets make a mistake, but it's probably better than leaving it to the mental arithmetic of everybody who is working on the till. Now they can, if they wish, talk to you, scan the products, and it all goes well. Or we can scan them ourselves. And the alternative is that we would have to accurately do the arithmetic. Frankly, the machine is better at that. And so we don't want to compete with the machine. What we do want to do is we want to leverage the machine. We want to use the machine to make us more powerful. And that's what this picture here, I think, symbolizes quite well. So in sampling and field work, we can use our intellect to say, we want a balanced design. We want these people to be selected. We want this replacement process to be brought in, and then the machine can do that for us. In social media analysis, that we will decide what are the best sites to investigate, but then the machine will collect the information and it will put it into a form where either we can process it by eye, or we can process it with machine, or we'll use a combination. Text analytics, again, one of the things we want to do is we want to pull out the right text. We want to take out all the stop words, the and the and so on. That's what a machine should be for. In terms of analytics, I can remember when I used to do statistics, some standard deviations and all of these things with a mechanical calculator. You turn the handle. I have to tell you, life is much better now that I can ask it to calculate various statistics. I then look at them, I make decisions, and I ask for more statistics to be run, and I'm leveraging the machine. And of course, the other way are the pre-built solutions, where you can go to companies like Validate It or Zappy Store and say, I want a link test, I want a brain juicer ad test, but I want it pre-built. I don't want it bespoke. I want it faster and cheaper than buying it from the original company. Another way that we're leveraging the machine, and this is an article in SMR Research World by Stephen Phillips, who joined me for the webinar to talk about this, is the growth in artificial intelligence tools. There are so many new tools coming into market research. There are going to be more next year. There'll be more the year after. And the year after that, there will be an absolute flood. And the best people to use market research, artificial intelligence tools are market researchers. We know the questions. We can guide the machine. That process is what we call intelligence augmentation. We want to do away with the clerical parts of market research and increase the capacity of insight professionals. We want to move towards having the polymaths, the consultants, and the specialists all armed with these tools, these artificial intelligence tools, to make them more productive and to take the drudge out of the work process. The fourth of my hints is a strategy of tactical efficiencies. And there's been a whole webinar on this. And if you find this fascinating, I urge you to go back and look at the slides and listen to the recording of that. But the key point here is the business is what should be determining what you do next. The automation tail should not wag the dog. The dog should wag the tail. So you need to focus on the business. You shouldn't be, unless you're in the automation selling business, be focusing on automation. So one of the great examples of this is the success that Dave Brailsford has had with cycling in the UK. The UK used to be an also run at cycling, and over the last 10 years has become the premier nation in terms of the Tour de France and the Olympics in cycling, winning more medals and first places than almost the rest of the world put together. And that has been done by a combination of strategies and tactics. And one of the key elements that Dave Brailsford identified is, I want to make a 1% improvement in everything. I'm not looking for the super big idea because it probably doesn't exist. And anyway, my competitors are going to find that. I am going to look for that extra 1% that they might not find. So his strategy overall, identify and nurture talent. Great strategy, same as all of his competitors. A holistic approach to road and track. That is a bit more divisive. Not everybody was doing that. Makes a lot of sense. And we've seen British cyclists move backwards and forwards from track work to road work and back. For us, that might mean that we should think more about moving between social research, academic research, and commercial research, and more about moving between commercial research and marketing and other options within business, so that we get a more business focus within our market research. Focus on the Tour de France and the gold medal. So he had specific goals. We should have specific goals. But then the strategy of aggregation of marginal gains. And for us, that is a strategy of technical efficiencies. Where can we apply something that makes our processes better. Now, that might be outsourcing. It might be insourcing. It might be investing more in training and education, but it will involve automation. We are looking for places where if we bring automation in, it's going to make a difference to what we do. But it's not a strategy of automating. It's a strategy of looking for the right tactics of bringing in incremental gains. So we get this yin and yang perspective of automation, because automation is the biggest disruptor in our industry. It is going to reduce the cost of projects massively. It is going to increase the speed of projects massively. It's going to allow fewer people to handle more and more and more projects. So that is going to be a really big disruptor of the industry. But if you focus on automation, you are going to be lost. You need to focus on the business and then find the automation that helps you do that business better. So how do we apply that strategy of technical efficiencies? You've got to identify the pressure points in your business. What is it that's actually slowing you down? Does it take too long for this to happen? Do you find that you have to recruit people? Do you have to recruit consultants? In which case, maybe an automated method of recruitment is going to help. Is it at the analysis stage? Is it in the reporting? Is it in the follow-up? All of these, you need to identify the pressure points. Then experiment with solutions. Don't spend 6 months, 9 months trying to find the best solution, because within a 9-month period, the best solution changes. You're looking for low risk. You're looking for negligible investment. I'm going to come back to not building, ideally not buying, renting. You want to focus on learning by doing these low risk experiments. Don't create big plans. Fit the new ideas into your broad strategy. And I use this analogy of Lego quite a lot. So things that build together, building bricks, and you might be Lego, but you might be Meccano, you might be Connects. These are all different building tools. You don't want to mix imperial feet and inches tools with international metric tools, your kilometers and kilos. So think about integration, think about building tools, not a big bang solution. The 5th tip is you've got to be alert. You have to have, in presentations, have cute pictures, and meerkats are obviously going to be high on that cute scale. But here, the key point is being alert. Don't get your head down and say, right, we've made those changes. Now we're going to focus on the business for 18 months using these new tools. And when you get to the point of delivery, you look up and you find that the world has moved on. There is a new competitor. There is a new way of doing business. So you really need to be spending some time. So everybody should do this. But just like the meerkats, you should also have some individuals who are charged with the specific role of knowing what's going on. Looking out for reports. So this is a report from the GRIT study from earlier this year, looking at what automation had been adopted. What automation had been adopted by suppliers and what automation had been adopted by buyers of market research. There are 2 series of conferences. Both of them happen around the world in different continents. The first of those that I'm very heavily involved in is IIEX. So we have just had, and I wasn't involved in that one in Latin America. There is one next month in Asia. In February, there will be one in Europe, in Amsterdam. In June, there'll be one in Atlanta in the United States. So there is one within your region in all probability. The other one that I'd strongly recommend is Merlian's MRMW. They have some great speakers, some wonderful new ideas. And again, they're around the world. They're in Asia, they're in Europe, they're in the Americas, they're in Africa. So you can get to these events. And when you go to these events, make sure you spend time in the exhibition. The best stuff is not on the stage usually. The best stuff is in the exhibition and in conversation with other people. So if you hear someone say, looking at a presentation, say, "Huh, we were doing that last year," have a chat with them over coffee, find out what they're doing this year. Where do they see the future? Don't delay, do it, to steal the Nike. We need to move out of the small market research bowl into the much bigger business intelligence bowl. Now, we're not going to be such a big fish in there, but that is where we need to be swimming. We don't want to be delaying. We don't want to be overthinking this process. The time is now. The tools are available now. And if the tool that you want isn't available, well, come back to it in a few months, because it probably will be, and there will be something else you can be using now to make your business more efficient, to increase the speed, to reduce the costs. There are two forces at play in terms of just doing the automation. One is what is available, and the second is the pressure points. And you're trying to bring these together. Pressure points can be resources, capacity, money, opportunity, disengagement. Okay, maybe you find your clients aren't reading the reports you're sending. That is disengagement. That's a real threat. How can we use new tools to make these things more relevant? So if we think about the device I've just installed at home, Google Home, and I can say, hey, the name of the product, and ask a question, and it will give me an answer. The reason I didn't say it is that it probably would have run because it's sitting right next to me. We want to be able to say things like, hey, Kantar, how many people are doing this? Hey, Ipsos, can you run this through the community for me? And so on. That is where we need to be thinking in terms of changing that engagement process. Nobody is there yet, but there are some interesting things happening. So how do we choose the options in order to do this? Just do it. First recommendation, avoid the bleeding edge. Bleeding edge is a term that's been around in tech and software for 30, 40 years or more. And it's a pun on the leading edge. If you're too close to the leading edge, it's going to be full of errors, crashes, problems, and so on. Now, some people psychologically need to be on the bleeding edge. That's fine, let them. But for most people, you don't want to be that close to the edge. You want it to make money for you within 12 months. So from starting to install it, to getting it running, to getting a return on your investment, it needs to be within 12 months. Timelines have got that much faster. It needs to integrate with your other systems. So as you move into more and more of these, you want to know they move forward. I just mentioned that I have introduced Google Home. So the first thing that I look for when I'm looking for smart lights is I went for Philips Hues, because that fully integrates. The second step is to look at things that integrate through if this, then that. And I'm not going to bother trying to buy anything that's smart that doesn't at least have if this, then that, and I will go for direct integration as my first choice. And that is how we need to approach the automation process. We want self-contained tasks. So this is linked to knowing it's going to happen within 12 months. Everything you do should have a start, a finish, an end. It should be up and running. You don't want any of these project creep type situations where it keeps going, so you don't actually know whether it's profitable. You don't know whether it's changed your business because it hasn't really got boundaries. It has to be things that are big enough to matter. So you have maybe this job. Every year you have to spend 3 days doing this horrible manual process. And each time you do it, you look at it, you say, oh, we should be able to automate this. Yeah, but probably you shouldn't as a priority, because it's not a big enough thing across the whole year. What about the things you are doing every day? Interestingly enough, I found with my home automation that one of the things that I'm looking at as the highest priority are the things I don't do, because that actually really makes a difference. So let's not do these things that happen occasionally and are unpleasant, but let's do the things that happen frequently or should happen frequently. And look for big savings. If you look at something, you say, well, that should just about pay for itself in the first year. Don't do it, because it won't. Things always cost a bit more than you expect. So pick items that are going to show really significant savings. Faster is the most important thing for clients, but actually for you, it's also going to have to save money. Do worst jobs first. So there are some things which you and your staff like doing, and there are some things you loathe doing. So let's see if you can automate those. If you can automate the process of timesheeting properly, and I have to say I haven't found a good solution to that yet, that would be what you do, because people hate doing that. Whereas you really wouldn't want to automate the process of having occasional drinks with clients, because by and large people like that process. We're looking for the pinch points in the business, and all the time, this comes back to not letting the tail wag the dog. We're looking for client-focused automation, things that will make a difference to what the client receives. Yes, of course, from a business operations point of view, we're going to look to make our business more efficient, but we should be really client-focused, because that's what wins business. That's what prevents churn. So that takes us to tip number 7, standardize. And this is the one that quite often, when I say it in face-to-face situations, I get a shudder, particularly from qualitative researchers. But automation and agile research depend on standardization. However, that standardization can come in 2 forms, bad and good. Bad standardization is the cookie cutter, where we just keep making the same thing over and over again. Good standardization, it's where we make building blocks. We can put the building blocks together in lots of different ways. So the speed of the automation allows us to move faster. We can create agile research solutions because we have tested blocks. And if you talk to a qualitative researcher who says, oh, I'm not into standardization, I hate standardization, I'm into this wonderful ethnography, find out what they're using for their video capture, and you'll find it's probably going to be MP4 or WMV. It's going to be one of the standard data formats. They are probably going to be using an iPhone or an Android smartphone in order to collect that information and to use standard format. They are probably going to be using Keynote or Page or PowerPoint or one of these standard packages to pull their information together. So they want standardized tools so they can do non-standardized bespoke research. That is why Standardise is so important in automation. If you want to be an artisan, you really want to have tools that allow you to be the artisan, that are going to give you a very, very consistent process that you can take forward. Hint, tip number 8, buy, better still, rent, don't build. Within the research industry, there have been times when it's great to build your own solutions. And so I remember in the early 80s, we wrote a data collection program. Lots of other companies wrote data collection programs to collect data on PCs, CAPI. We wrote analytical programs. In fact, my first job in the research industry in the 1970s was writing statistical software. So there are times when writing things and creating things is the right way to go. And there are times when it is not, when you should be using other services. So generally speaking, you should be using a SaaS service for many of these things, because that is how you reduce your development time. That is how you reduce your investment. That is how you focus on what you want to do instead of how am I going to build it. So we want to focus on where to drive the car. We don't want to focus on how to build the engine. So this is what we need to be thinking about in terms of market research. And in particular, for those of you who are entrepreneurial and you're thinking of building your own systems, this is the typical loss and profit module. So this is a little bit like a drinking vessel we call a yard of ale in the UK. And the blue space is what happens to companies. The large oval shape at the bottom is where nearly everybody will be. So most companies will make a loss. A few companies, a large number of companies, but slightly smaller than the half, are going to make a small profit, and a tiny number of companies are going to make a great profit. So if we think about sentiment text analysis from social media, probably 2 or 3 companies will end up making all of the long-term profit in that area. And there must be 20, 30, 40, 100 companies competing in that space. So most of them will fail. So we don't want to be in the position where we're doing that. What we want to do is to be in the buy or rent. If we're in the buy or rent, we have a much better chance of making a good profit. There's still a chance of making a loss. Some people always do in business. We won't make hyper profits that way. If you are the successful technology company, you will be bought at higher multiples than a research company will be bought for. There are bigger profits, but there are much bigger risks and losses. 9, Agile is a process, not a mess. Sometimes when I see the term Agile used, it's really just a substitute for not planning properly. And there is no excuse for that. That is not part of the process. The other thing is that Agile research is not Agile software development. You cannot lift the techniques of Agile software development and simply apply it to the market research industry. And the first reason is very straightforward. Research is not the product. If we're using Agile software development to develop a new game, the game is the product. If we're using Agile software development to develop a new web app to enable you to see your doctor in 2 hours, that is the product. When we are doing research about a new soft drink, the research is not the product, the soft drink is the product. So that is a fundamental difference between the two. So a new product, the new soft drink, might use Agile development, but it needs the research it uses to be right. So when we do Agile software development, we use tools, Ruby on Rails or Python libraries that have been proved to be accurate so that we can develop things quickly. Somebody developing the new packaging for the new soft drink wants to know the research tools have been tried and tested. They don't want to be flexible in the sense of not being right. They want to be flexible and capable in the sense of I can use them quickly and get results. Agile research is the rapid application of pre-built tools blended with the right amount of human inspiration. It's not the same as the software development. So if we look at it in the sense of concept testing, we might say, okay, we could go to Millward Brown and we'd buy a full-blown traditional link test and we'd have all that advice and we would look at some ideas, test it and launch. Or we could buy the cut down LinkedIn test from somewhere like Zapistore and we'd do a cheaper option than the traditional because we'd have 2 test and learn. Or we would spend just as much money as a traditional, but we would have 3 levels of test and refine going on within that. So Agile is the process of looking at our options and deciding which ones to run because we trust those options and we're adding in the human inspiration to that process. And the 10th and final point is focusing on skills. If there are waves, and there are going to be waves with automation, dare to surf. What do I mean by that? Be the person in your company that evaluates new automation. Pilot new approaches. You want to be the people in your organizations. You want to be the teams in your organizations. You want to be the suppliers to your clients who are piloting the new approaches. You want to be the people who are training others how to use automated approaches. That makes you more indispensable. You want to join or ideally lead cross-disciplinary teams looking at new ways of working. So if you're in a client-side organization, you want to be working with ops and marketing and finance and all of these people to find out new ways of doing things for 2 reasons. 1, you want to learn what they're doing, but 2, you represent the customer. The rest of them need you to be there. If they are going to be customer centric, and most organizations want to be customer centric, they need you. So that's another great reason why you should be in those cross-disciplinary teams. And you want to help deliver new outputs. So when you're bringing in the automation, don't just do a good job. Think about what else could we do, because most of the exciting innovations have come when somebody has brought something in and he said, you know what? We could do this with it as well. So if you're a new researcher, get a good grounding in the basic research techniques. And this is one of the courses that I'm associated with, Quick Declaration of Interest, the University of Georgia. I write some of their materials. But also look at a broad set of skills, develop your personal skills. Work collaboratively, be known as a team player. That means helping other people and allowing people to help you. And develop your personal brand. It's becoming more and more important that you have a personal brand that is portable. It will go with you as you move from department to department or from company to company. What about veteran researchers? Well, you've got a great advantage. People with a short career have a short lever when they're trying to move things. And you have a long lever. You've got a lot more experience. So you can become the consultants and the polymaths, the people that make things shift because you're levering on that long career and that experience. But just like the new researcher, you have to keep training, you have to keep learning. One of the great things about Canada and about Australia when I run courses there is we get many more senior researchers. By senior, I mean older, and I mean paid more, to put it very crudely, turning up for training because their professional development scheme, the requirement to have so many points per year, is much better embedded. But people should feel that need, no matter how senior you are in the industry, by using any of those measures of senior, to keep growing, keep learning the new techniques, the new tools, the new perspectives. So in summary, focus on delivering speed. Don't compete with the machine. Leverage the machine. Let the machine make you be more powerful. Don't have a big theory of automation. Keep looking for technical efficiencies. Have a lifestyle that means you are looking out for change. Don't delay, don't overthink it, do it. Standardize. You cannot automate, you cannot go in for agile research unless you standardize, but don't do the cookie cutter. Don't build it. Think SaaS, think renting, buying if you have to. You want it to speed, you want to be doing stuff. Agile research is not agile software development. So don't think you can take the manuals for agile software development, the Scrum Masters and all of that and simply apply it. And focus on skills. The biggest difference in terms of automation going forward will be the people who have the most skilled staff will be the most successful. So thank you very much, and I look forward to any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Ray. And we do already have quite a few questions. So I'll start with a couple from Luca Meyer, who's tweeting us today. So he's asking, what makes veteran researchers become obsolete potentially faster than they wish to?
I think there are a couple of things. The first is if they think that their knowledge is something which they should keep to themselves because that keeps their power base. In fact, you can teach other people things and they will still not be as good at it as you. So you'll just be known to be very effective. Whereas if you keep it to yourself, then it's actually going to become redundant because fewer and fewer people are going to use it. And the lack of vision about the opportunities created by new techniques. So the best veterans in this sort of space, and they're Pat Malloy, for example, I hope he wouldn't mind me calling him a veteran, but he's my sort of age, but he's always looking at a new way of using stuff. And that is what you need to do. And I can see other people of our sort of age who just want to keep doing what they used to do, or they see it the way it used to be seen. And that is what tends to make veteran researchers irrelevant. Or they go off into a niche where they can last a little bit longer.
Right. So I guess the advice there for veteran researchers, or even researchers who maybe have been doing something quite niche, hold a lot of knowledge about that, is what I'm hearing from you, Ray, is share it. So potentially what you're saying there is do webinars, maybe take a leaf out your own book, Ray, because you do webinars, you blog a lot, people like Annie Pettit, these thought leaders in our industry who do share their knowledge, are not diluted in terms of their thought leadership anymore for it, are they? If anything, it strengthens it.
Absolutely. And it will also challenge you, because you may be quite confident about something, and then you talk to some young researchers and they will say, yeah, but why don't you just use a WhatsApp group? Why don't I just use a WhatsApp group? That's a good question. So when you do that, you need to have that openness to hear the challenge. And I guess when I'm talking to researchers aged under 25, 9 times out of 10, they've got a bright idea. They're wrong because it has actually been tried somewhere before and I know what's going on. And 1 out of 10, I'm wrong. And I need to be really quick at spotting those, because that's how I improve.
Right. So with the 1 out of 10, then hopefully that in itself is not an incorrect statistic, Ray. A little drum roll joke there. Right. So we've got another question from Luca, and he is asking. Oh no, sorry, lost it there. So this one, sorry, is from another researcher on Twitter who's saying, what would you advise on how to encourage a team to sort of give up an idea on perfection and just more focus on getting things done, from your earlier point today, Ray, about things being finished, not necessarily perfect?
Get them to talk to the people who are going to use the results and listen to what the priorities of those people are. And there is a certain arrogance that's been very, very common in research. And I remember Martin Sorrell complaining about it many years ago at an MRS conference. We think we know the right method to use, the right sample size, but actually the person buying the service determines the right level of accuracy, the right level of cost, the right time frame. Our job is to make sure they buy it in an informed way. And of course, there is a level at which we wouldn't sell it if it was just too cheap and nasty. But it's not our job to insist that it's done to this level. And particularly if you're an employee, you might say, oh, I'm never going to send it out until I'm absolutely sure of this. You need to check who's going to pay for that, because the client isn't willing to pay for that. Your employer isn't willing to pay for that. So if you're going to do it in your own time, that's fine. But you can't actually do it in work time or your client's time, because you are doing something they are not willing to buy. At the end of the day, whether something is good enough is determined by the recipient, not by the deliverer. Was that photograph of my wedding good enough? It is, if I think it is. It doesn't matter what the photographer thinks to me, because I'm the client. And always we need to be focused on what does the client say is good enough? What is the client experience? What are the client's needs? And it's great business practice to slightly over-deliver, but only slightly.
Right. Do you think this almost obsession with some people to get things perfect, do you think that might be a confidence thing, that they want to get something done right because actually just going for getting things finished, getting things done to a kind of adequate level, that actually requires probably a bit more confidence, doesn't it? Do you think it's a confidence thing?
When I've talked about this before, it is for some people. So for some people, getting it to a perfect standard is just an obsession. And we all have obsessions. I have plenty. And that's just a fact of life. And for those people, it is quite difficult to say, I'm going to deliver it to this standard. The second group, you're absolutely right. It's because they are not confident. And they are the people who most of all should listen to the advice given. So you do a presentation, and if people tell you it is good, then be willing to believe that it was good, at least up to a point. You can ask, well, tell me a thing I could improve and a thing I could change, and pick it up that way. But you really do need to focus on what other people say, particularly the users, the end users. Not many people in a research world are going to tell you, yeah, that report was exactly what we needed if it wasn't. you can normally trust clients to be honest about that, frankly.
Right. Okay. That's really good advice. Okay, so a bit more back to the automation subject. Slightly longer question here from Zach Adams, who's saying, by default, isn't automation thinning out jobs in market research on the vendor and supplier side? And are we creating all these DIY tools, automated platforms, SaaS marketplaces, and putting so much power in the hands of those on the client side that one day we'll have to be client side or be doing something completely differently? And then Zach goes on to add that he's not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing, though.
I think there's a lot of truth in that, that it moves jobs around. If we take something like Vision Critical's online communities, I know of clients now who have gone from having very small insight teams to 10 or 15 researchers working on their insight community. Now, those jobs would have existed supplier side at some point in the past. And obviously that is not bad for the industry if people move from client side to agency side or agency side to client side. That's just a change. I think myself that we won't have a research industry at 10, 20 years from now. I think that we will have research skills and research professionals who will be in different sorts of organizations. Some will be on the client side, some will be in management consultancies, some will be in design companies, some will be in outsourced management companies. I think that the case for having companies who make 90% or more of their revenue from market research is going to get rarer and rarer, except for real specialized groups. So I think we will certainly see ethnographers and qualitative researchers, small agencies who specialize just in that. But I don't think we will see a distinctive separate industry 10, 20 years from now.
So, I mean, are you saying, Ray, in a way that we're kind of all just heading towards a more, I guess you could say, business intelligence direction? So not really separated by, research and qual and quote. We're just all kind of heading to this business intelligence of just really being client focused.
Not as individuals. So somebody will be a quantitative researcher specializing in the application of conjoint analysis and structural equation models to understand consumer behavior. But the sorts of employers they may have will change. So they won't be employed by necessarily a research company. And we will have other people who are really good at working with social media data, intuiting meaning from what's there, writing a report and so on, but they won't necessarily work in a market research company. So the skills will be there, provided we keep developing them and we keep organizing them. It's just the logistics, because if we think about the research industry, why do we have an industry? Well, we needed organizations that were big enough to print lots of questionnaires and to mail them around the country to a labor force of hundreds of people who were knocking on doors. So it made sense to have that sort of horizontal agglomeration, and you had people that did a lot of that and they were good at running it, and then they became good at running call centers. So that was part of the business. The future of research is that the most important non-research bit is going to be software, but that will probably not be within the software companies because they get within the research companies because it's going to be SaaS. So now you're left with just an industry that is staffed with salespeople and researchers effectively and management. And that doesn't make an industry. It makes a set of skills, and those skills will be located in different places.
It's interesting, Ray, to hear you talk about the almost like the origin story of market research. It all sounds quite kind of logistics based, doesn't it? And it's ended up being many layers of specialisms.
Yeah, it was all logistics based. When I was first in the industry back in the 70s, the way that you priced a lot of research for clients was it was 2.5 times the cost of the fieldwork, because the fieldwork was the most expensive thing that you were dealing with. And therefore, and you really didn't think too much about the time of the researchers, their executive time within that process. Now, one of the cheapest things in the process is the fieldwork. And there are many, many more expensive parts in the process. So we've had to rethink the model already. But you can see the same thing in terms of the fashion and design industry, where the countries that have the leading fashion and design do not have the manufacturing. The manufacturing is by and large done somewhere else, but the thinking, the design, and if we take the Apple iPhone isn't made in America, but 95% of the profits for the iPhone go to Apple. They don't go to the manufacturer. So it doesn't make the industry less profitable to be really focusing on the skills, the thinking.
Very, very, very true, and a good kind of backstories there to share about research and how things have changed over time. So looking at the present day, we've got a question here from Reneke Reitzma, and I'm really sorry if I'm pronouncing that probably really badly, who's asking, could you give some examples of successful automation from the market research industry? And no doubt, Ray, you've got a couple of really good ones up your sleeve.
Yes. Hi, Ranika. Hope the weather in Amsterdam's good. Lots and lots from history. So CATI was fantastic automation. People used to dial, and then the machine dialed for them. And then the automation got so clever that it would do predictive dialing, so that it would know that an interview was going to be free shortly, and so it would dial the next person up in advance. And then we stopped using CATI. So there is a really nice story of where automation moves through and then becomes redundant. But that cycle is getting faster. Zapistore are a great example, but let's jump to another one, SurveyMonkey. Any DIY platform is a fantastic example of automation. It's only possible. DIY platforms, whether you're booking flights with Expedia, whether you're doing anything else that's an online service, when you're using Amazon, all of those DIYs are based on automation.
And indeed, Ray, you've got a survey launched between you and Sue, or the benchmarking survey's been using Survey Gizmo, is that right?
That's right.
So they're another great example there.
They are, but it's happening inside the big companies too. And most people underestimate the Ipsos's, GfK's, Kantar's. So I've been talking about how you can buy a link test that's automated one way, but actually most of the link test process that you buy from Millward Brand themselves has now been automated. It's very different to the days that I worked there back in 2000. And those sort of processes. So we're seeing that all the way through. In terms of social media analytics, the analytics automation hasn't been great so far, but the collection of the data has been automated really well. That is something that is working tremendously well. Right. So, yeah, there are lots and lots of bits and pieces that we can see around that are going in the right direction.
Right. And I mean, I would say with the big companies and the Ipsoses and the GfKs and so on, do you think it's partly because they've been around for so long that people don't tend to sort of look at them for kind of inspiration and innovation, and it tends to be these smaller companies, and particularly because we see them so much at our conferences? Do you think that's why the bigger companies tend to be just sort of a little bit ignored, really, on the innovation side of things and automation developments?
Some of their automation, of course, is behind the scenes. So they will be spending money. If we take GfK and some of its panels and things like this, they'll be spending money on how do we currently do business, making that more, making it faster, reducing error, reducing cost, and none of that should be visible to to the end users other than it arriving faster and cheaper. So you don't see that these processes have been improved behind the scene. Whereas if you are a small company with no clients, then actually what you're talking about is your innovation, and we're changing the model. If you've
Right.
got thousands of people buying your ad test, you don't say, hey, we've changed the model, it's completely different. You say, hey, the model's just as good, but because of efficiencies, we can trim the price down a little bit. So
Yeah.
you don't shout about your innovation in the same way. And of course, most of the innovation we see from small companies will be failed innovation. So there is a
Right.
lot of
Okay.
it. Some of it will be fantastic, but most of it will fail.
Okay.
If we go back 5 years, there were a stack of companies doing geolocation innovations around
Yes.
mobiles, and almost every one of those companies has gone
Right.
because it didn't quite work with the tools available, the timelines, the client needs, and so on. All of the
Right.
companies that were setting up to use Google Glass have had to rethink their model as well.
Yes, that's very true. Yeah, Google Glass was a big thing at one point, and then it sort of died a bit of a death, and no one really heard about it after a
Well, they
while.
cancelled it. That's why, but they're
Yeah.
bringing it back again.
Oh, right, okay. Well, let for the listeners, hopefully these stories of failed innovations not put you off. So moving on to the next question, we've got just a couple left. So another one from Reinecker, I think that's the right way I'm listening to Ray pronounce the name there, who's saying you state, Ray, that buying is for most companies a better solution. What companies can you suggest to investigate further?
Well, it depends what you want to automate and at what level. So you can go to Zapistore, validate it. Research Now are coming along in that sort of area as well, where you buy the thing is completely finished and packaged. Or you can go to people like Vox Pop Me to be able to put their elements into your system. So we want to do more with video, so we'll go and talk about them about integrating their app into what we're doing. Or we are going to talk about using a SaaS service for analysis, in which case we might go to Brandwatch or somebody like that. So you
Right.
start off with, where are our pinch points? Where are we struggling to do something, or where do we want to do something new with a low risk? And then that's where you would go. And buy is probably a second best option to rent.
Mm.
And when you rent, you want things with nice short-term cancellations as well, as opposed to, yes, you rent it, but actually you have to pay sign up for 2 years, like you do with a phone contract. The shorter, the better, even if it's more expensive.
Right. Okay. Well, Ryder-Carr, I hope you feel that that's good advice there. So final question here from Zach Adams, who's saying, I work with a group of non-researchers who created a very cookie cutter research approach that they refuse to change. How would you suggest getting them to budge?
I usually don't try, but then that's one of the luxuries I have of trying too hard with anybody that refuses to budge, because I like to work with people who are saying, I need to change. How do I change? It is more fun. I think you probably have to understand what their processes are, how they see their business, and what their end goals are. So I know 2 people who work with out-of-date software, and what they do is they go around the world fixing machines that use that out-of-date software. They've decided that there's a really good business for a few people going around fixing these old stuff. There are some companies who are making quite good money now out of CATI, telephone interviewing. Because CATI has crashed, most of the big companies have closed their CATI centers. If you do want to run one of these, then you need a legacy, is the phrase they use in software a lot, to do that. So if you've got a solution and you're happy for your business not to grow, and you don't necessarily want to work too hard because you've got a good work-life balance, it can make sense to be on the old stuff. Going for change isn't going to be for everybody. Or maybe you keep the basic product the same, but actually your automation is going to be in everything else. You're going to automate your accounts. You're going to automate the control of the environment. You're going to automate the purchasing process, maybe the hiring process, and leave that alone and use it as a milch cow. It's simply going to generate revenue.
How interesting that Catty is back in. It's almost like hearing that the 80s jackets are back in fashion. Interesting.
Yeah, it's perhaps more like vinyl. Vinyl is nothing like as big as it used to be, but for those people who still have it, it's good, and in fact it has grown from where it was. So
vinyl's got a huge resurgence now.
And so there are some things that Catty does well, but it had to crash first because the main demand wasn't there. So you will see that sort of thing. There is some postal still in our industry.
Can you believe it?
Yeah.
So, Ray, that's all the questions from the listeners. Just wanted to end on a couple of comments about what I think we could call PPBs, personal portable brands. You mentioned that earlier, Ray. Do you have any just very quick tips for creating a personal portable brand for our listeners? Maybe a couple of things that they could do just to get things rolling?
Yeah, I think that the key tip at the moment would be to focus on LinkedIn. So I tweet, I use Facebook. My daughter uses those and Instagram for her business because it is more visual. But in the research world, the strongest one at the moment is LinkedIn. So yes, you want a LinkedIn profile. And the thing I would say is follow some people who are having interesting conversations, because you will learn from those conversations, and occasionally add comments to those. The fastest way you will grow your number of contacts with people who you might be interested in is by adding a sensible comment, a sensible question to somebody else's status update and putting them there. And I would encourage people, more than tweeting, to put a status update. When you see a link, not many people are going to follow it to start with, but that will start to build your brand. And then the other thing I would say is you want to, particularly if you are not brave, be braver and do that internal briefing. Or if you're sent on a training course, say, oh, can I have a half-hour session where I talk about what I learned in the office? And these sorts of things, put in synopses, is the next step up from there. So more and more people get to know about you. Make sure that you have a photograph that represents the image you want to create, that relates to business, and shows you in a positive light. So those are probably a few things around the portable social brand.
Okay, so knowledge sharing, getting involved in the conversation, and trying out new things like submitting to conferences. So I think that's really good advice there, Ray. So Ray, I'm going to give the floor back to you for the closing notes. But thanks so much for some really great answers there.
Thank you, Betty, and thank you for joining us in all 5 of these webinars to act as in Q&A. It's made life much more interesting and made for a much better session, and that's been really appreciated. Thank you to all of our sponsors, especially to Zapistore for being the platinum sponsor and for this series of 5. I hope you found it useful. Please, when the materials are available, do share them with all of your friends. They are not gated, so you'll be able to get straight in and access them and so on. And with that, it's goodbye for this series.